And welcome back to Touchline Talk here on 110 Sports. So we're going to play a little game here. I'm calling it Premier League Fact or Fiction. I've come up with some statements, prediction kind of things after these first 4 weeks based on what we've seen from these teams as a way to acknowledge that what we've seen has changed my perspective and I'm sure everybody else's perspective on things. So we're going to start with statement number 1 here. And we're going to start the only place to start, which is Everton. So our first fact or fiction, Everton will be a factor in the title race. I'm going to say this is fact, but with a little bit of a caveat. When I say factor in the title race, I'm not necessarily saying they're going to be there at the very end of the season competing with Liverpool and Manchester City. What I'm saying is that when we look at the title race throughout the season, Everton is going to be in that conversation. They're going to play a role. Maybe by March, they've fallen behind a little bit. But I don't see them having this poor run of games here where they start dropping points and all of a sudden they're in 5th and then never do anything to challenge the top again. I fully expect somebody to have to go catch them. I'm just not willing to say they're not going to get caught, if that makes sense. The only real concern about this team, I've said this before, is the injuries and the reality that we haven't seen James Rodriguez play a complete league season in years. Because that's how all of a sudden they don't become a factor in the title race, is if he's done for a couple months, or you lose Allen for a couple months, that could be the poor run of form that does them in and all of a sudden they're nowhere near the top. They're 3rd, 4th, 5th, whatever it might be. To me, that's the only way they don't stay in the conversation for most of the season. And I would also argue that if they come away from the Liverpool game with a point, if they don't lose the Merseyside derby, they are already a factor in the title race because they would have taken an opportunity away from Liverpool, who pretty much everybody views as the favorites at this point, I think, to take points off of them. And they will have already played Liverpool and Spurs and still be right there at the top. To me, that means you're a factor in the title race. Now, if they lose that game and then have a poor outing after that, this might look really silly. But I believe in this team. I think they're going to be there. Somebody's going to have to beat them. I'm just not willing to say that somebody won't rise to the occasion and that Everton's going to be going neck and neck with Liverpool or somebody else till the very end of the season. But they've done enough for me to believe they're going to play a role here. That you're going to look at some of these games, starting with this Merseyside derby that Everton play in, as key matches in the title race where the outcome is going to shift how we look at the top of the table. That's kind of how I'm defining this. On the other end of things, statement number 2, Burnley and Sheffield United will recover from their slow starts. I'm going fiction. I said before the season I was really scared for both of these teams, and so far that has come to fruition. And here's really the only number you need to know. Sheffield United 16th in expected goals and Burnley's 18th. They're not scoring. They're not creating chances. More importantly. It's a little disrespectful to Sheffield United with what they did last season. But you also have now given teams a season to prepare for you. It's no secret what they do. I think teams kind of got caught by surprise with these overlapping center backs and the very odd system Chris Wilder uses. But now that you've seen it a couple times and you're going up against it for a 3rd time with a pandemic break to think about it, because you know all these managers are spending at least a little bit of time thinking about random things like that. All of a sudden, teams are more prepared for them, and they've really struggled. And They weren't great at creating goals last season either. They were just so good defensively, so in sync and well drilled, and found a way to get enough goals. But you catch a couple bad breaks and all of a sudden you're in trouble. However, I do think they're ultimately going to stay up. I didn't predict them to get relegated. I still think they're going to be okay. But they're going to be down at the bottom of the table. I don't think that they're going to put together a nice string of wins or an unbeaten run or something and jump up to 12th and stay there. Burnley, on the other hand, is in an awful spot. I'm really terrified for Burnley. Sean Dyche has big-time issues with the board. They had zero impact signings. There's a chance at some point they lose James Tarkowski. They've been able to hold on to him so far. But those center backs are always going to be in demand. And teams can always use more center backs. Again, 18th in expected goals. They're not creating much. They never have. But they've built themselves on being so resolute defensively. And it's kind of the opposite of Bournemouth. But similar in the sense that that one thing you do really well, if all of a sudden you just become okay at it, you're in huge trouble because you're so bad on the other side. So Callum Wilson doesn't score the goals he's supposed to, David Brooks gets hurt, and all of a sudden Bournemouth's relegated. If Burnley's not keeping clean sheets consistently and Nick Pope is not up there in terms of leading the league in clean sheets, they're going to be in trouble. Because they might find a way to get a point if they give up a goal, but they just don't have the firepower to stay with these teams if they're not elite defensively. And there's also just the reality that having a manager frustrated with your board who has earned the right to expect some support financially to take this team to the next level with what he's been able to do with them, to feel like he's not getting anything and is just kind of having to try and keep this team afloat, doesn't help anything either. The vibes are very negative at Burnley right now. All of that combined really scares me. I would be stunned if they pull this thing together and get out of the relegation battle at any point this season. Number 3. Arsenal will have a better season than Manchester United. I'm saying fact. 2 primary reasons. 1, Arsenal has been good defensively this year. I know that's kind of hard to believe and seems very strange to say, but they have been, it's true. They haven't been phenomenal, but they've been good enough. And when you have the offensive weapons they have, good to very good is all you need. And they've delivered that so far. Finally getting a center back in Gabriel who seems to be able to really do some positive things and actually impose his will and just be consistent defensively. Now, he hasn't been able to play as much as everybody would like, but they're getting it done with the back. And now you've got Thomas Partey coming in, who's only going to help with that in terms of providing another important dynamic piece to that midfield who's going to do the defensive work, play box to box, all of those things. And then you've got your Danny Ceballos to connect with Lacazette and Aubameyang and Saka and Pepe and all of those pieces they have going forward. The bar for Arsenal improving defensively is not making catastrophic goal resulting mistakes. If you can just not gift goals to the other team, they're going to be better defensively than they have been these past couple seasons. It's been just awful at times. It's different when you go get a kind of center back like they did this summer than signing David Luiz. It just is. So if they can keep those center backs in this kind of form, this confident, this consistent, I absolutely buy what they're doing. And the other part of it is that, if nothing else, you have seen the kind of cultural improvement and cultural changes United have not been able to make happen at Arsenal under Mikel Arteta. He has found a way to change the sort of DNA of that group of players and change the narrative and change their mental state in a very positive way. He's teaching them how to win with the FA Cup. Of course, the question is whether you can do it over a full Premier League season. They're not where they hope to be by any means. But it feels so different. And a lot of it is him. And the more Manchester City struggle, the more you have to look at him as a big reason for their success. Not necessarily to take anything away from Pep, but Arteta has a way to connect with players. It's becoming indisputable that he is one of the managers that is making a massive impact at any club he's at. So now he's getting his chance to build this thing in his image with very little pressure, because it can't get much worse than it's been in the past couple seasons before he took over. And they are turning things around, and it starts with the mentality, it starts with the culture. United, on the other hand, are the same team we've seen year after year after year. The talent's there, they tease you with really good stretches, but ultimately they're going to have whatever lapse of concentration or poor outings, or they're just going to go back to being the same team. You saw the struggles at the end of last season, and not necessarily struggles, but they dropped some points. They were on track there when they were flying to waltz into the top four, and then a couple of shaky games at the end. Obviously, it's been a disaster so far this year. I stand by what I said. If they want to have any hope of finishing in the top four, Solskjaer needs to go now, because he has clearly not been able to fix this problem. It's not a problem he has created, but they're a mess, and it starts mentally and culturally. And until that changes, I'm taking the team that's figured out how to make that change. I like what I'm seeing from Arsenal. They're not title contenders, they still need more pieces. But they are absolutely on an upward trajectory. Manchester United are just kind of sitting where they always have and not really doing anything to change my perception of them, which I thought had happened at the end of last season, but clearly I was just wrong. Number 4. A non-Big Six club will finish in the top 4 and participate in the Champions League next season. As much as I like what I've seen from Everton, I'm going fiction. And that's just because I'm not doubting Liverpool. I'm still not doubting Manchester City. I've been on the Spurs hype train since the beginning of the season, and I don't think it's fair to draw anything from Chelsea so far, because they haven't been able to put their best team out yet. Having Ben Chilwell as your left back makes a huge difference. I've been harping on that since last season. A true left back in that system is crucial. The more Havertz and Werner play, the more comfortable they're going to get. Pulisic hasn't been able to do much of anything yet. Still waiting on Ziyech. Once we see that team and continue to drop points against West Brom and go down 3-0, then I might change my tune on this. But with the way everybody else is playing, the only team that's really threatening there is Everton and maybe Leicester. I just think Chelsea has too much talent. They'll be able to figure it out. Again, Manchester City, I like that new center back pairing. If that's going to be a thing moving forward. They're so banged up right now. I think they're going to find a way to pull this together. Spurs, the new signings, once Bale gets implemented, the way Son and Kane are playing, you saw really good stuff from Ndombele against Manchester United. who, if he gets going and finally gets some confidence and feels like Mourinho actually, respects him and things, that's almost a new signing in and of itself too. With everything else they've already done, those are my four. And I find it hard to believe Everton's going to crack that top four, but they're going to be there for sure. This is more about how good I feel about these four teams, still with everything that's happened, than it is my questions about Everton. And then number 5, more than 2 Premier League teams reach the Champions League quarterfinals. I'm going to say fact on this too. I'm not doubting Liverpool, I'm not doubting Manchester City, so that's 2 automatically. The other teams you've got here are Chelsea and Manchester United. United got the bad group, but I was the least confident in United for obvious reasons anyway. So, if I'm trying to get 3 teams in, that's exactly how I want it to fall. Which means this question to me comes down whether Chelsea makes the quarterfinals or not. They should get out of their group easily. And I'm holding to my theory they're going to figure things out once everybody is healthy and once they have all of these weapons at their disposal. And Ben Chilwell is completely integrated at left back and Thiago Silva's integrated at center back and all of that stuff. Which means they're going to be in better form. And if they can win their group, they should be expected to win that round of 16 matchup in the knockout round. I think there's no reason to assume they don't win their group, which means you're going to have to, barring something wild, you're going to have to at least feel pretty good, if not feel really good about their matchup in the round of 16. So I'm just going to bet on the fact that Chelsea is in better form by then and that things are clicking and stay consistent with my belief that's what's going to happen and say that all 3 can get into the quarters. Then you've got some questions. I could definitely see a world in which you only got 1 representative in the semis. But you've got some teams in Italy. There's nobody in Spain that's particularly scary at the moment for me. Of course, you got Bayern and you got Dortmund. But and PSG. That's really it, though. So I think there's absolutely an opening for 3 Premier League teams to make the quarters. I'm going with Liverpool, City, and Chelsea. So that is our Premier League fact or fiction. It's fun to be able to do that with the international break as we start transitioning back to club competition as things get underway this weekend. We're going to take one more break. When we come back, we're discussing all things Project Big Picture, this revolutionary idea proposed by Liverpool and Manchester United, what exactly it is, what it means, and where things go from here, because there are a lot of people who are not a fan of this, which means this rendition of it probably isn't going to happen. So, what's the next step? We're going to talk about all of that when we come back. You're watching Touchline Talk on 110 Sports.